It's been the same. Oh no, you're not doing this to me again.
Oh my gosh, it's
Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubs of the Club, your University of Idaho affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brian Marceau, joined by everyone's favorite Eagle or Vandal, Patty Frakes. Patty coming in from a heartbreaker that he talked for 1 second about in the intro in Cheney. Patty, how's it going?
Doing all right. I don't know if heartbreaker is quite the right word because, Eastern was it was feeling like a little bit of a blowout in the first half. So the fact that they were able to battle back was like kind of surprising. But tough day. But I don't know. Good talking football as we are, and it's been a busy past few days between exams, football, and coaching. So I might be a little scatterbrained. Apologize.
Yeah, you know what? Ron Lowney in the comment section already there saying 29 points to Cal Poly. Come on, man. And I got to tell you guys, this game, which we'll talk about, sponsored by Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. This was one of the weirdest football games I have ever been to. Just from everything from start to finish. Hey, the attendance was lower. It was about 8,800 people there. That trickled in it when the game started. It felt like 3,000 were there. So hey, it got better, but you start, the energy is weird attendance wise, especially coming off a sellout. Idaho's energy was not fantastic to start the game out. And I think Vandal fans need to not get over this. The injuries are decimating this team right now. So Idaho's starting Art Williams at running back, who no put down to Art Williams. We'll talk about his output, but that's the third string running back. Jack Wagner, as we all know, is the third string quarterback. Idaho, throughout the course of this game, lost Andrew Marshall to injury, and KJ Trujillo went down with some injury too. So That means all number 1, 2, 3, 4 cornerbacks for Idaho are either out of commission or injured. Kind of a big deal, right, Patty? We have the O-line injuries that aren't about to vanish. And all of that is to say, in the first half, man, like the energy for Idaho was weird. They looked worn out, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Even at the start of the game, the team just looked worn out. And that's part of why, again, Cal Poly, not a good football team, but hey, want to give credit to Cal Poly for what they did. Like they hung in with Idaho. This was a 14-6 game at halftime. I mean, Idaho got on the board first with a 44-yard field goal by Cameron Pope to top a 9-play, 42-yard drive. And that's towards the end of the first quarter. There wasn't a ton of scoring early because the teams essentially are trading 3-and-outs early on. But so it's 3-0 at the end of the first quarter. Cal Poly scores back-to-back touchdowns. A 17-yard touchdown pass from starting quarterback Bo Kelly to Giancarlo Woods. And then a 3-yard touchdown pass from Richie Watts. Watts is like the Zach Borish style quarterback for Cal Poly. He comes in, mostly runs, but he'll throw a short pass. He threw a 3-yard touchdown pass to Alec Marshall, make it 14-3. Mercifully, Idaho got back on the board with 2 minutes left in the second quarter. Another Cameron Pope field goal, this one 25 yards to cap off a 7-play, 67-yard drive. That was your first half scoring. And then Idaho absolutely murders Cal Poly in the second half, outscoring the Mustangs 21-2. And again, speaking of weird things, like the weird 2 points that Cal Poly gets as off a blocked extra point where the ball was blocked, it bounced like 7 feet up off the ground, then was returned 80 yards for the safety. But that safety didn't take place until we'd already had an 8-yard touchdown pass to tight end Mike Martinez, courtesy of Jack Wagner. Rocco Koch had a 2-yard touchdown run on the next drive. On the next drive, that's where the safety took place. And then Idaho's third score of the third quarter, a 21-yard touchdown pass from Jack Wagner to Emerson Cortez Menjivar. Jordan Dwyer picked up a touchdown pass halfway through the fourth quarter. And at that point, it's 34-16, and then the game gets weird again. Cal Poly makes it a game, scoring. I mean, first, Cal Poly picks up a touchdown, a 4-yard pass to Giancarlo Woods, courtesy of Bo Kelly. Cal Poly then recovers. This is where it's weird. Idaho fumbles it pretty deep in Cal Poly territory and deep enough into the game that Idaho could have just taken a knee. Honestly, they could have, but they didn't. So Art Williams fumble, returns 79 yards for a touchdown. That's the final score. That's what makes it 34-29. But it was weird because Idaho looks just as bad as they could in the first half, which I'm going to ask you in 2 seconds about, Patty, to help explain. Idaho really kicks into gear for the third quarter and most of the fourth quarter, but still almost truly finds a way to almost give the game away, but whatever. Sometimes you win ugly, and what matters is the win. Patty, so we'll talk about what went well, what did not. It's essentially talking about the first half and the second half. So Patty, tell us what you saw in the first half, because there's a lot of weird stuff in this game, not just from both Idaho and Cal Poly.
Yeah, the first half, you said it. The Vandals just look wore out, right? Like they look like a team that is kind of hobbling their way through these next few games, trying to get to that bye week, get a little healthy. The defense, like, they weren't necessarily awful, but that Cal Poly's offense was just executing very well, and the defense was just, 14 points and a half isn't necessarily god awful, but it felt a lot worse as you're watching it because Cal Poly is just nickeling and diming it down the field.
And then, Idaho was getting no pressure on the quarterback at all.
Yeah, for sure. And part of that is that Cal Poly was getting the ball out real quick, which is, good. It is something that Cal Poly tries to do, but the offense just was just bad. It just did not look promising at all. Idaho wasn't really able to run the ball super effectively. It seemed like they wanted to go more towards the shorter pass game with Wagner, and it just didn't look very good. It doesn't seem like that's not his strong suit. There was a couple drop passes, if I'm remembering right. It's just it seemed like, wore out. The energy's weird. It felt almost like and this is a little. I mean, shout out to the flag behind me. It felt a little bit like the first half of the Eastern Washington Drake game when you're watching this and you're like, what is going on? Like the energy is just super weird, super low energy. The other team's just executing. We're just not like. That's kind of what this first half felt like, and I'm not sure. I mean, part of it could just be Cal Poly was up for this game, and maybe Idaho was kind of, I wouldn't say looking past it, but it's Cal Poly. It's a team that you smoked last year. They're at the bottom of the Big Sky. Maybe it's a little bit of looking past it, but it just generally the first half just looked like just poor. That's kind of all it was.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you got to give before we spend time talking to Idaho, and you hit to me a nail on the head. You do need to give Cal Poly some credit. Idaho's been more susceptible to teams through the air, and in particular, Idaho's been more likely to be willing to play with a little bit of a cushion and make teams continually complete enough plays where a long drive is a high degree of difficulty, assuming that they're also going to get to the quarterback some. Cal Poly in the first half, even though they only came away with 14 points, played about as well as I think they could have. And I mean, the Mustangs they've been for them minus the UC Davis last week. They had a couple okay outings. They almost beat Idaho State, a couple weeks ago. So, it's not like Cal Poly's talent free, but they're not good. And defensively through the air, Cal Poly's terrible. But the energy in the dome was terrible. People were getting frustrated. And honestly, it was, to me, from the Idaho end, it was about the worst half I feel like I've seen this season. Offensively, Idaho seemed like they weren't really sure what to do. And to be fair, with the number of important injuries Idaho's playing with, I wouldn't be shocked if the coaching staff truly feels like, man, we were kind of figuring out what we can do. Like you're on a third string quarterback, third string running back, plus down O lineman, plus you're down your number one tight end. That's a lot of guys to be down and to feel like what actually works for your team offensively. And in the first half, I think the coaching staff did what I think you might say is conventional wisdom, Patty, is try to say, hey, Jack Wagner, let's shorter plays, get the ball out quicker, kind of like Bo Kelly. Well, Wagner's not accurate enough for that to work. He doesn't throw. Bo Kelly on those short passes throws routine catches. Jack Wagner doesn't. And also, if you miss on some of those throws, you're thrown to the other team. One of the key plays of this game was Idaho's final drive in the second quarter. Wagner threw a pick at Idaho's own 10-yard line, but the Cal Poly DB came down out of bounds. If Cal Poly holds on to that, this is a completely different game. And honestly, after that play where Idaho looked like they were conserving timeouts to try to get an extra score in because they're going to get the ball to start the second half, the Vandals packed it in right away, which was the right call, and then regroup at halftime. But it was a different story in the second half, a completely different story, which is great news because I think the point people need to take away from this is two things. One, good teams do win ugly games sometimes. Patty, you've watched Eastern be good and come away with some shockingly close wins in the past, right? I mean, recently it's been frustrating losses, but in Eastern's run of being good, they of course still had some shockingly close games. That's just how
always.
Yeah, that's how this works. Not everyone wins every game by 100. Idaho gave their worst shot in the first half and was still just a one-score game. So that, hey, keep that in mind. While I just think people need to, I mean, I'm reacting a little bit to the discourse in the hashtag OnlyTubs Discord, patreon.com/Tubs the Club to join the best online place talk Idaho sports in the world. It's a third string quarterback, guys, and a third string running back. And we're down to the number 5 defensive back. So the team that's more susceptible to in the pass game is starting to get picked apart a little bit because of the lack of DB depth. I mean, I think the word we have for that is normal when you're down to your third string guys. But we got to talk about the second half because things did completely turn around in the second half. We'll talk about the second half right after we talk about Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey, one of the best buys in Idaho State liquor stores, guys. It's a 3-grain whiskey, 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. You got two options: the entry level Stampede, that that sells for $26.95 in Idaho State liquor stores, or you want to buy the small batch 1915 edition, aged an extra 2 years, kind of a premium Canadian whiskey, that's $38.95. You can't go wrong with either bottle. Get yourself one today. So the second half, Idaho came out with a little bit of fire, and they scored 21 points in the third quarter. So, and Idaho rang the bell. And some of you guys will know that commercial that I'm making reference to. Idaho turned things around absolutely right away in the third quarter. I mean, the Jack Wagner one, he's starting. They called different plays. They called a lot more play action for Jack Wagner, where he's throwing longer. That was the right call. And a guy who had a big game, including one of the wildest catches I've seen off a pretty tough pass from Wagner. Mark Hamper has had some tough times this season with drops. 4 catches, 103 yards from Mark Hamper was huge. Jordan Dwyer picking up his touchdown in the second half was huge. And Wagner on the game. Now, this is where you kind of have to watch the game to be able to delineate this. In spite of his rough first half, Wagner goes 17-23 for 347 yards, 3 touchdowns, did get picked off one time. But Idaho has one of the worst halves I've ever seen them play. And the Vandals still finished with 453 yards of total offense. So got to talk about a couple things that went well. And again, the play calling changed. And when the offensive play calling changed, the energy changed. And then defensively, energy was a lot better in the second half. So, Patty, tell me something that you kind of keyed in on from what you saw as far as, Idaho turning things around in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the big plays. The big plays started coming, and when big plays start coming, teams have to, back up their safeties a little bit, back up their linebackers a little bit, and now you can run the ball more effectively while you're hitting your big plays. And, I think just the deep ball started connecting, seams started opening offensively, and that's where you find 30 points of offense and a half, right? I mean, a lot of big plays is the big point there, and defensively they just kind of batten down the hatches. Part of it is, Cal Poly started having some miscues offensively, as in drops and a couple missed throws that
a couple bad snaps.
Right, and they weren't really having that in the first half. But, I mean, I think this goes back to Wagner just looks like he is more comfortable in kind of a play-action pass style of offense where he's throwing up 50-50 balls and he's handing the ball off. And, I mean, when you're playing good teams, that can sometimes have trouble. But when you're playing a team like Cal Poly or playing in a defense like, next week, Eastern Washington, I think that's just the formula that they got to stick with and kind of ride it out until number 2 is healthy.
You're 100% there. I mean, we've seen this. This is where one thing I want to bring up with the coaches, which is, whenever there's a tough game, it's kind of easy to second guess coaches. I don't really think it's fair to do that with these guys right now with how many backups they're playing. But I want to say something that, the coaches got right. It just took everyone, including themselves, a while to figure it out. Wagner has just not been successful with slow drives, with long, methodical drives. Like I know people are used to out of Idaho. He's not this year. Don't know about in the future, guys. This year, that's not going to be Jack Wagner. I just don't think that's just not how we can do it. And I feel like the coaching staff in the second half settled down back on, we've lived on big plays with Wagner. And the reason we've lived on big plays is because that's what his strength is. And Cal Poly's weakness is the secondary. So if Wagner is going to exploit a secondary like Cal Poly, he's got to get play action. He has to know where he's looking at, but he has to have a window where he can have a little margin for error with his accuracy. And for the most part, Idaho's receivers really stepped up today, had one of their better games. Jordan Dwyer did have a really frustrating drop in the end zone because that would have been a game changer. But not every break went against Idaho. I mean, I already covered the interception. There is another huge break that went Idaho's way in the third quarter one of the two terrible snaps Cal Poly had was one was on a punt. Punter picks it up off the ground, starts running, makes honestly an incredible play to get a punt, like a bicycle kick punt off in the first place. And then as Captain 58 saying, muff punt, I believe it was Emerson Cortez Menjivar who then tried to play the punt off of a bounce, which was a mistake, touched it off his chest. So it's a freebie. Then suddenly, sorry, Simon Miller saying to take the Ron Lowney point off there. Okay, I will. I hope you like that, Simon. After off of the muff, Cal Poly looked like they might have secured the ball. They did not. So then the ball goes further back. Idaho gets it. The play is reviewed. It was a pretty tense moment there in the dome, because if Cal Poly comes away with that, it would have been one of the most dramatic swings within a single play I've ever seen, where Idaho's pretty damn close to blocking a punt or, tackling a punter who's running because of a muff snap. And then he gets the punt off. So at that point, you're still thinking, okay, like, hey, great defensive effort. And then suddenly it looks like Cal Poly might have the ball off a dumb mistake trying to field that punt. It broke Idaho's way. So things worked out, but that's just one of the things I mean. This was the weirdest game I had, one of the weirder games I have absolutely ever seen. But the biggest story to me in the second half is Idaho put things together. Good teams have some ugly wins. Good teams with injuries can have some ugly wins. The coaching staff responded to how the team was playing. The players responded to the message from the coaching staff. And Idaho looked a lot better for almost all of that second half until, I don't know, like it felt like a kind of weird discipline thing with the coaches not taking a knee at the end of the game when the game was over. That led to the fumble that put Cal Poly back in. But whatever. Idaho has an astounding number of injuries. The big thing for the Vandals is to get through these next 2 weeks and hopefully have Jack Lane back, who at halftime we got to see throwing. He was throwing the ball about 20 yards in warmups. Honestly, had his pads on. I was hopeful with how bad the first half felt that maybe Lane would come out. He did not, and that's good news. But the Vandals come away with a win. We'll get to things like players of the game in a second. But first, hey, gotta let you guys know before we talk about that, you got to get in contact with, you just have to get a hold of Hughes River Expedition. If you're looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, don't look past your backyard. Venture into the largest protected wilderness in the continental U.S., located right here in the great state of Idaho. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of no return, the Salmon River Canyons, or the Selway, and even check out special trips like the one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the country. You just bring clothes, let HRE handle the rest. So what are you waiting for? Find out what it's like to grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 800-262-1882 or check them out at hughesriver.com. All right, Patty. I feel like I could talk about this game for both an hour and 2 minutes at the same time, with just how weird the environment was, how up and down the game was, how devastating the entire dome and the Discord felt at the end of that first half, how in the second half things start clicking and it's Cal Poly, and Cal Poly started making mistakes too, which the Mustangs are going to. But before we start other takeaways, offensive player of the game for you.
This is a kind of a tough one to choose, just because it was such a ugly game for a half. But I think I'm gonna go. I think I just go with Mark Hamper. I mean, he made some big plays down the stretch. It's kind of one of those games where there wasn't like one guy that like elevated above the rest to me, but all three of the main receivers had their big moments. But I'll go with Mark Hamper for player of the game.
Yeah. So, hey, Captain 58 saying garbage time TD and ugly turnover made it look close. Like, hey, you're kind of right, Captain, except they got it to within 5 points. And if that onside kick works out, I mean, again, like that's a few ifs compounding, but it felt like there never truly was there should have been garbage time, but there wasn't with the resolution of this game. So my offensive player of the game, I'm going to go with Jack Wagner. I mean, for how bad Wagner looked in the first half, which by the way was the dude was dialed in the second half. Was the play calling was better, but Wagner stepped up, took care of what he needed to, thrown for those 3 touchdowns. Rocco Koch also he had a rushing touchdown, so it was nice to see him in. However, pretty much when he was in, he was just the running quarterback, so like it was relatively predictable. But whatever, that's a 4-stringer who got a touchdown. That itself is a big deal. Defensive player of the game, Patty.
I think defensively it's got to be Tommy McCormick. I mean, the dude had 10 total tackles and 2 TFLs. I mean, he was flying around, man. And I mean, you could throw Jackson Eck in there too, but I think having a safety that can come up and help in the box the way that McCormick can against a team like Cal Poly that throws a lot of short little passes. If your safeties aren't tackling well, those short passes turn into big plays. And I mean, we saw that in the first half with that one weird one where Briscoe like bounced off of like 3 tacklers. So I'm gonna give it to Tommy McCormick.
Yeah, man. Speaking of which, how ready were you to kill someone when McCormick got called for targeting, like 1 second into that game?
Was it McCormick or was it? I thought it was Matthias Birch. It
was
McCormick.
Yeah, it was McCormick.
Yeah, that's right.
Like it was reviewed. It wasn't targeting because it brain dead was not targeting.
Yeah, it was.
But hey, how were you when you saw that? How'd you feel?
Yeah, I was surprised, but like, if you lose a guy like that, that's tough. It makes the matchup, I think, even tougher just stylistically with the kind of player he is. Because I don't know if Idaho has another guy like him really on. I mean, they have true freshman Diesel Wilkinson who kind of plays a similar style, but he saw the field today a decent amount, but it would have been kind of tough to fill his shoes and keep the defensive production up. But luckily that didn't happen, thankfully.
Yeah. So I'm going to go hey, big picture. I mostly would go Tommy McCormick, but
yeah,
I'm going to go with Isaiah King think, if the theme today was big plays, defensively, King had 2 huge plays. One, 12-yard sack. He has 7 tackles too, but a sack for 12 yards. And then a play that at the time felt like it was a pretty big deal. Keyshawn James Newby gets the quarterback, deflects a pass. His deflection, like the pass off his hand, goes high. And Isaiah King comes down with that pick. So a big sack, a big pick. If your theme is big plays, you're going with Isaiah King for today. So hey, those players of the game. Any big takeaways for you from this game? Because I have 1,000 different ones. I'm curious what direction you want to take this in. Because again, it was such an ugly game that the team still rebounded. And yeah, Cal Poly's garbage, but they did what they needed to.
Right. I think you can kind of look at it from 2 angles. You can look at it the optimistic way, and you can look at it the dreadful way of, oh my gosh, we played a close game with Cal Poly. Or you can look at this and say, I mean, the overall takeaway for me, like kind of watching this game and box score surfing is, I mean, Idaho is playing at this point, it's a majority backups. It feels like the majority of the guys on the field are second stringers, third stringers that maybe didn't expect to be playing the kind of snaps that they are this year. And Idaho is still winning games. They're finding ways to win games. And I don't think that is something that's very true for a lot of programs when you just look at the grand scheme of the FCS. For example, Southern Illinois came into the year a top 10 team. They lose their starting quarterback. Now they're a bottom feeder in the Missouri Valley right now. Like, they're a team that's totally fallen off the face of earth, getting blown out by everyone. Thankfully, that's not where Idaho's at. And Idaho has the schedule and just kind of mostly the schedule to, 1, get healthy, but 2, it kind of seems like they might be able to get a running start going into the playoffs. rather than kind of limping into the playoffs like we maybe saw the last 2 years, where, I mean, the injuries started to pile up later in the year, and the injuries are piled up. But like, you think of, I mean, Giovanni McCoy was hurt going into the last two postseasons, if I'm remembering right. I mean, you've got to think that, I mean, yeah, it sucks that Lane was hurt this whole year, but he's going to be healthy. And all of a sudden, like, the nation doesn't have very much film on number two going into the postseason. You know what this reminds me of is Tommy Malott coming out of nowhere in 2021 for Montana State. So,
in a different way.
In a different way, for sure. But, there's a chance for Idaho to kind of all of a sudden rebound and look really good again.
See, I'm going to go Crew has 76 saying throw the tape away and get our shit together for next week. I disagree. I feel like in the second half, Idaho kind of figured out who they were in a way that should matter. Idaho Real Estate saying crowd noise was non-existent, especially in the first half. The fans can create momentum in the dome, but it feels more like a golf match than a football game. The energy wasn't great in the first half. Hey, that's the other takeaway is fans. We need fans to be able to bring it. Like this does matter. Like I know that they lost against Montana State the week before, but like this is a good football team, guys. The football season is really short, and for Idaho, there's 5 guaranteed home games. That's like we build up all this excitement for it, Patty, all year, and then it's 5 days in Moscow itself. So you got to get there. If you can, you got to get there. I was a little bit disappointed in the Idaho fan base. 8,800 for a team like this, not good enough. I'm hoping it's better with Eastern next week. I'm assuming it should, because Eastern will at least travel as well. But I don't disagree with Idaho Real Estate about the first half. The crowd noise was absolutely minimal. Now, to be fair, when a team scores 6 points and Cal Poly's driving, it is hard to generate enthusiasm anyway. But so hey, two-way street. But we need fans to go up. Sorry, the initial point, Crew had 76. I feel like in the second half, that's where Idaho figured out how things are going to have to work. If Jack Wagner's the quarterback, we're not going to get the long drives. We need to just pick up these. We got the Cal Poly win. We need to get the Eastern win, and then hopefully get healthy on the bye. And then it's a new playoff for those final 3 games, or maybe Jack Lane's playing and things are different. But honestly, for Idaho, it's about surviving and advancing to the bye. That's it at this point. Idaho picked up the win. This is the style they're going to have to play against Eastern. And hey, Eastern doesn't have a very good secondary. So I think we're going to see more long passes from Jack Wagner, more play action, because that's what this team needs to do. So, yeah, that's why I don't think burn this tape. I think there's no reason to get down on Idaho defensively. They're beat to shit, and they're not getting the same amount of rest that you thought they might have gotten earlier in the year, based off Idaho having long drives. Like it's suboptimal. That's it. So the big deal is just get through until the bye. I'm blown away by how Idaho is still doing what they're doing as a top 15 team with this level of injury, Patty. Like you said, like honestly, it feels like we're closing in on the majority of snaps, like 50, when you say majority, you mean like 52% or something like that.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about around 50-ish% of snaps played coming from backups, like by the time Idaho's on their number 5 defensive back, who's playing regular minutes. Honestly, I have to look up the dude's name because it's number 5 defensive back. Why in God's name does anyone right off the top of their head know who that person is? I guess maybe, Patty, I want to throw it to you so you can contextualize this the way you do, a little bit different. The injury level for Idaho is astounding. I know teams always get hurt in football, but good God, how we're down to like everyone knows the quarterback situation. Don't ignore it. Now the cornerback situation is we're playing like the number 5 dude. We're playing like our number 2 and 3 punt and kick returner now, because also Abraham Williams is done. You tell he looked like he had a cast on. That's kick returner. Andrew Marshall goes out early, does not come back. Well, hey, that's the punt returner as well as the number one cornerback. I mean, give your responses, because I think that one of the things that's hard for the fan base to put together is you can be excited about your team while still acknowledging if this many guys are out, you have to adjust what expectations are, and you have to adjust what winning ugly even means versus just winning.
Right. And I mean, yeah, this injury situation is kind of nuts. And I mean, there are teams out there right now that think they're beat up, and they probably have half of these starters that are out as Idaho right now. It is pretty crazy. And the fact that Idaho's, I mean, they're winning games. Like, it is very tough to, what is Idaho now? 3-1 in the Big Sky, 2-1 in the Big Sky.
They're 2-2. They're 2-2, 5-3 on the season.
Right. So 2-2 in the Big Sky. Your 2 losses to the top 2 teams right now. I mean, if you look at the schedule ahead, you're thinking if Idaho can get out of Big Sky play 4-2, go into the playoffs, what 9-3, 8-4. That's a pretty dang good resume when you're thinking about the context of, hey, Idaho is playing a third string quarterback, backup running backs, backup corners all year, and potentially are getting some of those guys back as you're rolling into the playoffs. Maybe your seed isn't as high, but I think my thing is I'm thinking of the wins and losses in the playoffs. And if you're starting to get healthy going into the playoffs, that typically is a massive advantage over teams like, a lot of teams are kind of limping into the playoffs that are on that bubble side of things. They're just beat up. It's a long season. If you have guys that haven't played half the year and all of a sudden they come in, they're fresh, right? And I think it almost gives Idaho a weird advantage when it comes to January.
Yeah, or December.
December.
Like you got to get through December,
right,
if you're going to get to January. So that's phase one. Jamal Blendman's was the DB that I was talking about, who like I saw like number 26. Like, you guys, I have a show about this team. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this team. I don't know who number 26 is, but I know that he's matched up on Giancarlo Woods, and I know Giancarlo Woods likes that matchup. So, yeah, I don't know. Like we've done this show for a while. And we've tried to, especially since me and Dallas been running it, we've tried to be pretty direct about we respond to what's in front of us. We don't view things as like, hey, positive news versus negative news, or like there's just news and there's just stuff we talk about. I am a lot higher on Idaho, and Patty, you sound like you're probably like that too, than maybe a lot of people feel after barely squeaking away with a win against Cal Poly. Because again, like, this is the other thing that I think Vandals need to keep in mind. A lot of us are used to, like, if Idaho doesn't have a great outing, and I say a lot of us, that this is old timers, people have been there for a while. They're used to Idaho. Like if Idaho doesn't play well, they're of course going to lose. Idaho just played like their worst half of football we've seen since Jason Eck was there. They were down by 8 at the end of that half. Like if this team can just get a little bit healthy, I feel like this is a dangerous team come November and December. They're not going to win a championship, guys. Montana State, South Dakota State, North Dakota State are a different class than Idaho is right now, especially a not healthy Idaho. But I think this team could still get to a Final 8. Hey, UC Davis is top 10, is top 8, right? I think this is I just still would take Idaho over Davis in a rematch, especially if Jack Lane's playing. So this was such a goddamn confusing game to be at, to have like a cohesive takeaway. Because I felt you could feel the energy in the dome of people being frustrated. We could feel the online energy of people being frustrated. But I just think for the most part, if you're getting frustrated with this many backups that are playing, just take a Xanax, man. You just need to. Like this is a different level of difficulty. Crewhead 76 saying gotta clean up special teams, right? But also Crewhead again, like we have backups on kick and punt return That's kind of a big deal. Like Cal Poly didn't break off any big kick returns on special teams. And Idaho honestly came very close to a blocked punt. So I don't know. I almost have no cohesive takeaways from this, Patty, because it was such an atypical game. I mean, Idaho did take control. The injury, I guess, here's the biggest takeaway: injuries are a huge goddamn deal right now, and it's not. I don't think it's fair to the team. It's not fair to yourself too if you're going to be frustrated and not factor in the level of injuries. So, man, so we don't end up repeating ourselves. Although we have 25 live listeners, I always like when we have a decent amount of live listeners. I like to keep this going. Patty, tell me anything else that was really kind of magnetizing to you about this game.
I think I mean kind of an underrated thing that people don't think about when they're thinking about the top 5 teams in the country is, winning games is winning games. Like it's hard to win games, and I've seen that from the other end as an Eastern fan, as in Eastern has the talent to be a pretty solid team, but they just, for whatever reason, they cannot come out on top in these one-score games. And Idaho seems to, most of the time, be on the winning side of things, which is, I think it's a positive sign for the program as a whole. When you look at, I mean, ugly wins aren't always necessarily bad. A win is a win is a win. And, if you look at the history of, good Big Sky teams, I feel like almost all of them that went far had like a weird close game that should have been close. I think of, Montana last year dropping a game to NAU, looking bad against the D2 team. In 2010, Eastern damn near lost to Central Washington and then went on to win a national championship. So
2 years ago, Montana State, the team that made the semis, nearly lost to a pretty bad Northern Arizona team as well.
Yeah. And winning is winning, and it doesn't necessarily mean that on another day that team would beat you. So I don't know. Yeah. I think generally this is a little bit of a, hey, relax a little bit, guys. Like, we're gonna be okay.
Yeah, here's another, like, to me, like, count your blessings kind of thing. If you're gonna have your worst half of football, you're lucky it's Cal Poly.
Yeah.
Get like a half like that a half like Idaho's first one today against Eastern, that game's probably put away. Or, first half like that against Weber State later in the year, the game's probably put away. So I don't know, like whenever there's frustration around the team, hey guys, like I share it too. I'm banned from having coaches on here because of me being frustrated at the AD, guys. Like, hey, I promise you, I am with you on being viscerally frustrated with stuff. There was Idaho. Look, D Green 156-2able, very long handle. In the comment section, it's on screen, said, I said that was lucky too many times. You're right, but call yourself lucky that you were saying that against Cal Poly. Idaho, we want Idaho to win out, so they're hosting they're hosting come playoff time, and they're not playing Thanksgiving. We want those two things. That happened today. If this was Idaho State, honestly, Idaho probably walks away with the loss with how they played. So if you're going to have your worst game of the season, Cal Poly is a damn lucky team to do it against. We have one more week we need to shuffle through before bye time and probably Jack Lane's back. So for everyone who joined us live, thank you. 24 live listeners in the Discord. Patty and I should be going tomorrow. Patty and I are closing in. You're closing in, Patty, on being someone I talk to like as much as my wife. Nice. So glad you could be here. But anyway, dude, thanks everyone for joining. We got the power ranking show tomorrow. We have we got Eastern that we'll preview on Wednesday this coming week. Like Simon Miller says, that's why the games are played. Games aren't won on paper. Absolutely. Crew at 76 saying we are resilient as hell. It will pay off. Proud of Wagner today. That is the message I think you guys should take away. The Vandals did get lucky, and good teams need to get lucky once in a while. That's a reality. Yep. That absolutely happens. And hey, Idaho was the beneficiary of that. You can be pissed at all you want about some officiating, like some fans were, like I was at moments, but overall, I don't think luck was against Idaho today. I think a lot of things went Idaho's way. even if it doesn't feel like that. D Green earlier said, hey, it's a win that doesn't feel like a win. I agree, but the win-loss column completely disagrees. A win's a win is a win. Survive and advance this late with this many injuries. We'll see you guys tomorrow if you're joining for the Power Ranking Show. As always, go Vandals.
Go Higgs.
And of course, you guys think like I'm ready to close the show. Yeah, good one. Very. You know what? Blame Martin and Dallas for not being here. It is their fault. You think I'd get better at this? No, absolutely not getting better at this. See you guys soon.
This is producer Brian doing a terrible job of even finding what we're going to play us out with. So we're just going to call it good. See you guys Tuesday.